It's the savvy side of 9 to 5. Listen.
Bueller.
Laugh. And learn.
Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
This is the Focus Group with Tim Bennett.
Staunch.
And John Nash.
Keep your clothes looking neat and clean.
We're all business. Except when we're not.
Welcome to the Focus Group and the last week of Pride Month. The last time I can say top of the Pride or happy Pride before the leprechaun gets boxed and shelved till the next holiday.
So you're like a corporation. You're just going to do it in June.
It wears super thin beyond that. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is where you want to go to find out all about the show, the video and the audio feed. And yes, folks, top of the Pride to you, it's over. But before we let the leprechaun go, I would like to thank one of our listeners in Western Mass, Heather, who made my day by sending the following picture to our letters at FocusGroupRadio.com email. And she took this cup, which apparently the cup already said Pride on it, right? That's pre-printed. It's a styrofoam cup. And above the word Pride, she wrote happy, and then she Pride, comma, and then she wrote in John Nash, and then she took this picture of a leprechaun, or as Tim says, a leprechaun.
Leprechaun.
And she photographed it and sent it along. So thank you, Heather, from Western Mass. It made my day, made my week, possibly my year, because this means we've arrived. This mascot is arrived.
Well,
top of the Pride to you.
I was trying to find it, and so after I made the faux pas of doing the leprechaun, if I Googled it.
Other people have.
There's leprechauns everywhere. There's a corn on the cob that's like it's a leprechaun, and there's other things that people have done, and I posted them to our Facebook page last week so that people could see that.
Oh my God!
Apparently, it's a thing, the leprechaun. I wonder if that's how. I wonder where I got it from. That's an odd thing.
It's a pronunciation. You might have just said it you without even thinking. Like leprechaun is one thing, but
leprechaun.
So whenever the Pride leprechaun comes out, I'm reminded of another story that I used to do. So we had a friend named John. Remember, John was hilarious. John did some of our video collection for his own TV years ago, all the funny clips. And we're walking down Pride. We're walking down to
see the guy in Canada.
No, that's Vince. You're thinking of Vince. Okay. No, John is here in New York. So John and I and a bunch of friends are going to watch the parade. And we decide, like we're walking along, and John says to me, he goes, it's kind of like, the Pride is like gay Christmas. And we instantly we went into this thing where it's like, it's almost like the gay Christmas carol. The ghost of Pride past, the ghost of Pride present, the ghost of Pride future come to visit Scrooge, who happens to be this queen who's a shut-in or something. And eventually he sees the beauty of Pride and goes to the window and throws the windows open and says, and he looks down and and as we tell the story, there's a young guy with a cap sleeve tee, big guns, shorty shorts, like a little Pride boy to him. I say, boy, what day is today? And he looks up and he says, well, why it's Pride Day. Just like in Scrooge, right? Well, then go around to the store around the corner and get me the biggest dildo in the window.
Why don't you make that a film?
Pride. It was called the Pride Day Carol. That's what it was.
Pride Day Carol. That sounds hilarious. It was going to be an
entire takeoff on Dickens' Christmas Carol. And then we started then we started drinking, and the parade began, and then there was the moment of silence. We were really serious. Then we went back to laughing about the Pride Day Carol. We were trying to think of what was Pride Day past, what was Pride Day, what was the ghost of Pride present, and what was the ghost of Pride future going to be like? So I think it's ripe with opportunity.
Oh, it's great. You should trademark it.
I'm doing it right now on video and audio, trademarked. To the Focus Group, Pride Day Carol.
Pride Day Carol.
So then it went into like top of the Pride, and then that day, as the day wore on, it was really hot.
So the leprechaun was your mascot of choice.
Yes, and because it was the one that elicited the most hilarity. Whenever you'd walk up to somebody on the street, and
Happy Pride,
and John and I would be like, Happy Pride, or top of the Pride to you. People would just start laughing and like walk on, and I thought, okay, the leprechaun's the one that's got to stay.
Well, it's got the rainbow pot of gold. Mm-hmm. You got the whole thing.
It's got a lot of things that work. So
what do you have in your mouth?
I have a Ricola because I'm coming down with a little bit of a summer head cold, and you just told me, so go out and sweat it off. Get that heart rate up, sweat it off.
I didn't know you had anything in your mouth.
Well, I had to because my throat was a little scratchy. And you do a thing where you drop your.
I put it in the little drink.
But I can't. Yeah, I can't drink.
Why can't you do that?
I have to wash this.
Blow it out. You've had worse things.
Oh my God! Wait. Oh, now it's clean.
You've had worse things in your mouth. We all have. I blow it out every week.
That reminds me of that. That thing that you and I were reading on the comment board of something one time, where this guy was complaining about It was about the bare naked chef.
Right.
Someone was complaining about how dare he cook without a shirt on over a pot of tomato sauce or something, and then someone,
because the hair would get into.
And someone further down in the comment thing goes, "Gay men have had their mouths in a lot of worse places than you know."
Well, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, because that commenter was very specific about where someone had been.
You don't mind diving in and eating ass, but you're going to worry about the hair and the sauce.
There you go.
That's what they say. Not that you and I do any of that sort of things.
So that's Pride Month. Bob marched last week.
Did he?
And he had.
Did he do his little shorty shorts?
Oh my God! Okay, so his company gave them Pride shirts. Then there was like a rainbow, like it almost looked like a paintbrush had done a bunch of different stripes of color. He put these little sequin jewels on, and then he bought a pair of
bedazzled it.
Bought a pair of shorts, and the pattern was anchors. And he sat for hours, and he jeweled each anchor, red.
You're gonna wear them over
a lot of it. Well, he saved the shorts for a while, but a lot of the jewels fell off. You know, because it's not.
He was dancing.
He was walking along, and he saved his shirt, and he was afraid to wash it because the jewels will come off. And I said, "Why are you saving this stuff?"
Because he can't help himself.
And you know, his company has an archive, like they have an archive of company things. I thought, I said, are you kind of in the back of your head thinking Bob's Top of the Pride shirt is going to make it into the archive? And he just does this brief thing where no, I'll have to get rid of it because I can't wash it and it's covered, it's dirty from marching. But they had a great day. He marched with his company and had a lot of fun. He said the parade was extremely efficient this year.
Well, it needed to be.
They shortened the route.
I want to march next year.
Okay. Well, you and I just don't want to march. We want to march. Either we want to be in a vehicle, be on a float.
I have a couple ideas.
We wanted to be on a float in the Vegas Pride.
Well, you were going to do.
We wanted to do the MGM thing. We're going to recreate Little House on the Prairie.
You can't now. Laura Ingalls all upset. You saw that.
Oh
in the
my
books.
God!
You can't say anything anymore. By the way,
Laura Ingalls, the original author of.
Yeah, because she talked badly about Native Americans and something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you go back to any of these people's past far enough, you're going to start finding stuff you don't want to find, and suddenly, Well,
did you know? So I only saw Adam Sank, who has a show over on DNR,
yeah.
which we're broadcast over there as well, on their network. But he had talked about he had just found out, and I guess he said he heard it from Howard Stern, that there's two things that a lot of people say all the time, and I guess he said that people just say in language, and they were talking about. So there was someone on Fox that said, "You're out of your cotton picking mind," and the black person that was on there got very offended.
Yeah, that's a common phrase. Well, people say it. Yeah,
but apparently it got very offensive. The guy lost his job.
Really?
Yeah, taken
the guy
off the
that
air.
said you're out of your cotton picking mind.
You're out of your cotton picking mind.
Because he said it to an African American.
Right, but yeah.
All right, no, that's just the ground. Yeah.
So the other two that apparently lots of people say that are considered now racist, you're not allowed to say, is long time no see and no can do. Did you hear about this?
Guys, are you aware of this? We got
Garrett.
We have John on video, Garrett on audio. I say no can do quite a lot.
Well, you're not allowed to. They're racial slurs against the Asian community because they were adopted back in the late 1800s when they brought in all the Chinese workers. And it's broken English, and that it had come from there. This is according to the Post and Adam Sank's thing. So saying things like no can do or long time no see was broken. Now, and then somebody came back and said, well, literally, that's the translation in Chinese. The English translation is long time no see.
Yeah.
They're not. It's not making fun of them. That's the actual literal translation. But anyway, so I thought to myself, you're not allowed to say anything anymore.
Well, don't you think that whatever the origin might have been, that its use is decoupled from that and evolved to the point where it's just literally like an idiom or something that just we say?
Well, I laugh because Hall & Oates had that famous song in the 80s, right? I can't go for that. Can't go. No can do.
It's a lyric, right? Take them down.
You're not allowed to do it. So I don't want to hear any of that language out of you three.
John, Garrett, and John. Yeah. Okay.
We love you long time.
Now there you go.
Wait, what was that? Me love you long time.
Love you long. Wasn't that David Sedaris? Wasn't that?
Oh,
one of his books?
One of his books was Me Talk Pretty One Day.
Talk Pretty One Day. Yeah.
About his life when he lived in France for a while, and he was trying to learn French and speak English at the same time. And
I will say, I was reprimanded once by the Japanese for not showing the car on a wetty road. And the guy,
a wetty road.
he was a senior Japanese executive, and he was quite arrogant and professed to know English quite well, and he did, better than I knew Japanese. And he went at me about how come I didn't show the car on a wetty road, and I'd about had it. And I just looked at him and I said, I did show it on a wetty road, and all of the Americans were dying,
mortified, right?
Because I was like, how come you're not showing a car on a wetty road? I showed it on a wetty road.
Did you actually yell?
Yeah, I yelled right back at him. Of course, I ended up only being there about another week or two. But
What was wrong that time?
well, because I had it. How come you're not talking about the gas mileage? Because it's the worst in its class. Well, you don't have to say.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
This I do remember.
Okay.
And you were only
How come
7.
you don't show it on a wetty road? I showed it on a wetty road.
You're only 7 days.
The car was a piece of crap. Anyway.
So, great show today in honor of the last week of Pride Month, June. We're going to be welcoming Esther McGowan and Pat Owens from the Visual AIDS Organization. And me and Tim want to start doing more of this, exposing the listeners and our audience to some very, very cool LGBT-focused organizations and what they're doing. And I think you're going to be very surprised by what you already know about Visual AIDS from some of the amazing work that they've done. So they're coming on later in the show. And, of course, in the beginning, there's our banter, which you've been enjoying immensely right now.
You think?
No can do. I can't believe I'm not allowed to say that anymore.
Well, I'd say no can do or a long time no say. I want it all stopped.
People even text that.
You're not allowed to do it, John.
I just got that very same text not more than 2 days ago from a friend who just got back from a business trip, and he goes, "Hey, let's get together for lunch, ... Long time no see." I mean,
It's racist.
I don't know. So did you enjoy the rest of your Pride Month?
I told you I wanted to march, and yes, I did. But I also was reading an awful lot of essays. You and I had, gosh, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago now, we wrote a piece for the Huffington Post.
Yeah, we did.
Where we had said that we thought Pride should be on one singular
At least
day.
one holiday,
Should be one day.
Garrett was asking about that just before the show.
Rather than, and I think it was San Francisco, Chicago, and New York, and then some other little cities that were harder to get to, perhaps, all celebrated the last Sunday of June. But Philadelphia did, I think, the first Sunday. Somebody else does the third Sunday, second Sunday, whatever. But I just always felt that it would have more impact if there was just one
Nationwide.
day. Nationwide. That,
and then maybe
regardless where you are.
And then maybe later on, you do a special Pride festival or something. So that there's the holiday, and then maybe when the weather is different.
Well, in October, there's the coming out. Was it October 10th?
National Coming Out Day.
Right.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people do that. But even in Las Vegas, when you're talking about
Their Pride is
Pride, I think, is in
deep
the
into fall
because of the heat.
Yeah, the heat.
I think Florida's either early or late. Wasn't
Some of
Florida
our
March, maybe?
some are earlier than June, some are later than June.
Yeah, so
But once again, what do we say, Tim? Top of the Pride to you.
I'm going to get you an outfit.
For next year, a leprechaun, not a leprechaun, a leprechaun outfit.
I'm going to get you a corn on the cob and a corn on the cob outfit with a top hat and the whole deal.
And a unicorn with a rainbow. All right, so what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
I had 2 quick ones that caught my eye. I struggled this week. I had a lot of things, but some of them I thought would get in the weeds too much. But so these 2 headlines caught my eye. The first one was, he stole her credit card, but picked the wrong place to use it. So this is from a restaurant in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. The waitress was Flora Lunsford, 58. She had her car broken into a couple of days earlier, and her pocketbook was stolen, or her purse was stolen, her wallet, all her credit cards, her ID. And they couldn't find, obviously they didn't find it or whatever. This guy comes in and orders breakfast, and then he goes to pay for it with her credit card.
It's the place she...
So she looks at it and sees her name on there like, So this brainchild, Shaman West, Shamon, 21 years old, she took the credit card, she went and called the police and said, there's somebody here using my credit card.
Which was stolen.
Which was stolen 2 days ago. So the police came, And they went out to his car and, in fact, did find her wallet, her driver's license, all the stuff that he had stolen out of her car. And, of course, he was arrested. And they said the cops laughed and said, you would have thought since he stole her license with her picture on it, he'd have recognized the waitress that maybe he shouldn't have used.
He didn't even bother looking at the license, right? I mean, he just took it, yeah.
That was.
That's classic.
I always like that sort of that karma sort of thing.
I gave you a 3.
I gave you a 3, yeah.
Sophisticated crime for that county, that.
Columbia County, right over the
counterfeiting, yeah.
And then this other one I picked only because it reminded me of, there was a time in Philadelphia, this goes back to language. There was a guy here that went crazy in New York about the restaurant workers speaking Spanish.
Oh, yes, that was just
the attorney.
Literally 2 weeks ago, there was a guy that flipped out at like a salad place or something.
And there's a guy in Philadelphia at Gino's Steaks, and he ended up having a sign that he put right out on his where you go and get a cheesesteak, and it said, if you're not speaking English, we're not going to serve you. You had to speak English. You want anything other than English.
Is there an unintended consequence here? What happened with that?
Well, people tried to boycott and everything. He didn't care. He said, you had to speak English. My relatives came over here and only spoke Italian. You got to learn English. Yeah. So it was English only. You got a big sign. So this Dunkin' Donuts created their own little storm here in Baltimore. So there was a sign that the manager posted, and it urged any customer to report any workers they heard screaming or yelling in foreign languages at the Dunkin' Donuts. And they said, if you hear any of our staff shouting in a language other than English, please call, and they gave the phone number, immediately give your name, and report this employee, then you're going to receive a coupon for free coffee and pastry. And so one of the customers said they thought it was kind of odd that they were only concerned about screaming in a foreign language. They thought, should you be screaming in any language at the Dunkin' Donuts?
And the key word is screaming.
Right, screaming and shouting. So a number of people, and they said this reporter did try to call the Dunkin' Donuts and find out what was going on. And they said that the person who put the sign up is no longer employed there. But he had good intentions when he placed the sign, because he based it on his own personal judgment and trying to address some customer service and satisfaction issues about how the store was run. But obviously, the Dunkin' Donuts does not adhere to the policy, nor do they
condone it. Yeah.
Condone it.
Well,
like they said, in this day and age, you're allowed to do those sort of things. And
then we have a Supreme Court that will probably say, okay. Mine is somewhat far afield from those two hilarious ones. A thief who has no brain in his head. You don't go back to the scene of the crime.
Use a credit card.
At the scene of the crime? Yeah, you don't do that.
It's Arkansas.
No can do.
Here's my credit card. Long time no see.
Do. Long time no see. I didn't see that. Long. Mine's very different. So as a kid, I was always fascinated by Pikes Peak. And in fact, my grandfather gave me a rock collection from Pikes Peak, and there's a picture when you lift up the lid of the cog train, because they have one of those little cog trains that go up at the top. And Pikes Peak is also a place that Tim knows very well, because every time I mention it, you talk about how going down from the top of Pikes Peak really tests a car's brakes, right? Because they actually have pull-off stations.
You have to pull off, and they measure the temperature of your brakes to make sure that they don't
so
give
steep.
Out. So you have to stop at these checkpoints on the way down.
So I saw this. I read a blog routinely called Jalopnik. It's for car gearheads, and I'm always fascinated by it. And Volkswagen actually now holds the world's record, or the record, for the fastest drive up from the base of the mountain to the top, and it was for an electric vehicle. It's an electric, and it looks like this really super duper race car, designed that way to minimize atmospheric friction, because the air quality changes as you go up every 1,000 feet or every 350 feet. So the old record was held by, what's his name, Sebastian Loeb, and it was in an internal combustion engine, and he made it to the top of Pikes Peak in 8 minutes, 13 seconds, 13.878 seconds in 2013. Has not been, its record stands, and now this electric car that VW did, 7 minutes, 57.148 seconds. 12 miles, 156 curves in under 8 minutes. Unheard of accomplishment.
You've been on the road?
No, I'm dying. I would love to cycle the road, actually.
No, you won't. First of all, it's dirt.
There are a couple of paved sections, because he was on a paved section until you get to the very top. And here's the best part.
I'm riding that road.
No, you might. Maybe I shouldn't ride it. But so the driver of the car, Romain Dumas, said there are two things about the electric vehicle that really, really made it perfect for this kind of a time trial. And we talked about this when we were driving the e-Golf, the Volkswagen's electric or their rechargeable car. Torque and the fact that it did not rely on oxygen for the combustion, the internal combustion engine. So I was with Tim in Colorado at what was it? That sad
Loveland Pass.
Loveland Pass, and we were driving up in the mountains, and as we were going up to this other
Continental Divide.
Continental Divide, the car was really sluggish, and Tim said the reason why is because as we're going up, there's less air, and it's not taking enough in,
Oxygen.
and it really is an affecting thing. So electric is a pretty cool thing, and so what this driver was able to do is he would be able to slow down before a corner, and the minute he felt comfortable cornering, he would nail it, and the torque was so great that the car just shot off. But the funniest thing to me was this one. The car only had enough power in the batteries to make it to the top in one run.
Uh-oh.
Literally, by the time the car got to the top, it crossed the finish line and the charge went to zero.
So you had to charge it up to take
Yeah,
it
he
back
had
down.
to. So, John, I thought I put a little video in there of here's what it looks like taking off. It looks like a normal car, right? I mean, you wouldn't think it was electric. Except, look at that thing.
So when you get up into Pikes Peak after the pavement area there, it goes into dirt and gets very, very steep and quite scary. There's no guardrails.
Yeah, look at what.
It gets quite scary. And if you remember the Beartooth Pass.
Watch this. I would go right off the edge there.
It's scary. It's not. A lot of other car companies also use Pikes Peak as challenges or for testing, and it's nice here because if you're watching the video, it's closed, but usually the line is just
There's a line of cars, right?
So, yeah, you just putt up Pikes Peak and down.
Look at how high. Wow.
You know, the other issue they're trying to figure out with electric cars as they're becoming more popular is that because the cars are not going to need oil changes, you're not going to need a lot of the things mechanical stuff that a gas engine would need, is the service business at car dealerships is certainly not, it's going to take a hit. So they're trying to figure out how do you balance selling an electric car that needs very little maintenance from the mechanical standpoint on the engine. So it'll be an interesting thing to see what happens. Although I love the electric cars, I would like to get one.
The only thing I'll finish the story with, though, is the other thing was the power to weight ratio is a big thing with electric. So the heavier the battery, the harder it is it holds more charge.
Right.
But you're going to move the car in a different way than the light battery. So once they nail battery technology to be more efficient and faster charging, I think we're going to see these cars take off. And if you've ever driven an electric car, try the e-Golf. One of our most fun test drives. I mean, my God, that car was great.
I would love to have an electric car, as I said. So our business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Born today, June 27th, 1899. Died in 1981 at 81 years old. It was Juan Terry Trippi. He was the American commercial aviation pioneer, entrepreneur, and founder of Pan American Airways, one of the iconic airlines of the 20th century. He was also instrumental in the revolutionary advances in the airline industry, including the production of the Boeing 314 Clipper, which was open trans-Pacific airline travel, the Stratoliner, which helped with cabin pressurization, and he also introduced the Boeing 747, which brought in the era of jumbo jets. They initially thought that it was just going to be for long hauls, but they made the jumbo jet, as you know, the 747, for long hauls for people and for the tourist trade. And so they said after graduation, he graduated from Yale. He went and worked on Wall Street. He was bored. So he raised some money from friends in 1922. What?
He was bored.
But
okay.
Says he became bored. So he raised enough money for some of his old Yale classmates and bought some stock. He sold them stock in a new airline that he started, or a taxi service, and that he based out of Florida. And their first trip was from Key West to Havana in 1927. And then from there, he built it up. He bought an old airline from China and a number of other little airlines along the way, and then eventually turned into Pan American.
And Pan Am was in my opinion, that circle, that logo, and it used to be on that building at Park Avenue, was the symbol of elegant air travel.
Yes,
right?
No, it was. They were the gold standard, and they said that they continued to expand throughout after the World Wars, specifically responsible for many innovations in the airline industry, particularly, as I mentioned, the tourist class, so allowed people to travel more economically. He thought airlines were a way to help foster world peace because people would get to know one another better, and it also led to the fact of opening the Intercontinental Hotel Group, which Pan Am owned, because if you flew somewhere, you needed somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
And he ended up dying in 1968 after his second stroke. I believe he died in the building in New York.
The Pan Am building.
So happy birthday, Juan.
That's a cool business birthday.
Very trippy. I'm saying trippy. I don't know if it's trip. Trippe.
Trippy? Yeah, I wouldn't say it that way, too.
Yeah. I went to school with a kid named Trippy Ireland, so I'm thinking that's how he said it.
Top of the pride.
Top of the pride. Well, there you go. It all comes back.
No can do. That's good. I'm still stuck on that one. Hey, as many of you know, Deep Discount is a partner of ours here on the Focus Group, and we appreciate them working with us, and we love it when you shop at their site. June is almost over. Site-wide sale, fill your basket, hit click and buy, because everything's on sale at the site. And in honor of Pride, top of the pride to you, I've chosen two titles before we talk about the new release, which I'm actually really jazzed about. Actually, this whole month coming up of new releases from Deep Discount is phenomenal. Quick one for you. A 1998 movie called Gods and Monsters, starring Ian McKellen playing the famous director James Whale, who directed Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein. It also stars Lynn Redgrave. And why am I spacing on Brendan Fraser, who plays Clayton Boone? It's an interesting movie. Have you seen the movie?
No.
I highly recommend it. It takes place in the later part of James Whale's life, and he has an attraction to Clayton Boone, played by Brendan Fraser, but nothing ever comes of that. But they do form an interesting relationship. So it's called Gods and Monsters. And the other pick that I had was a PBS series based on Armistead Maupin's Tales of the City. There's a 20th anniversary DVD collection available at deep discount. I think it's 6 or 7 episodes long. Bob and I have such fond memories of watching this. Did you watch it on PBS?
Yeah.
Laura Linney, Olympia Dukakis. I mean, there's some fantastic character actors in here. I could sum up the music in my head. It was a really well done adaptation of that book. They did other ones later, but this one, this first one, this Tales of the City, was one of my favorites. So I highly recommend it.
And rounding out the summer sale, which is happening at deep discount, I picked to round out our movies for me for June. I picked one which I was surprised about. So I did the top 100 movies of the 20th century. I went through that list and picked one, and then I picked the top 50 movies, one out of there that every gay man should own.
To get your card.
To get your card. And the top 100, I was actually surprised because I thought this movie did not really do as well as maybe other movies of the 20th century. 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
This is a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love this movie. It came out originally in 1994 and starred Hugh Grant and a woman that I always had a crush on, Andie MacDowell. She was a little bit like my Molly Ringwald, too. You know, there was something about Andie MacDowell I liked. But it takes people through these 4 weddings and a funeral and these friends that are all interrelated. It's a romantic comedy, and I think anytime it's on, it's one of those where if I'm flipped through,
any point, you
leave it on.
Yeah.
And the other one is just such a cliche, but what I love about this one is Mommy Dearest. And John turned me on to this in Colorado when we were at Loveland. So this is funny how the show comes together.
It all came together, yeah.
But really ruined Faye Dunaway's career, supposedly. But the best part about it, this came out in 1981, and it's about
Christina Crawford.
Christina Crawford wrote the biography, her biography about kind of his horrible childhood with the mother. The best part about this, though, is you need to get the edition that they have at deep discount. And it's under $13, but it has the commentary from John Waters and Lipsinka.
Oh.
And so you watch the movie, but put
turn the commentary track.
Turn the commentary on from John Waters, and you'll laugh all over again. You'll see the movie in a whole different way because he'll say, "Look at this here." Remember when she attacks Christina and she's kicking up?
Yeah.
And John Waters is going, "Look at, you can see her panties," you know, and he's and he's beating the crap out of their daughter with the publicist sitting right there in the house. And so he brings out a whole different feel for the film. So get Mommy Dearest with the John Waters commentary and
Lipsinka
and
as well.
laugh.
Now, along that, what a nice thread into the release of the week, and it's on Criterion. So when I say Criterion Collection, that means buy it right now because it's going to be chock full of extras, including interviews and extra footage. And it's the movie Female Trouble. And if you're a Divine/John Waters fan, this is a must-have. And what scene do we know so well? When Dawn Davenport comes down on Christmas Day and she's expecting to get a pair of cha-cha heels, and she opens this box, these aren't cha-cha heels, and she destroys the Christmas tree. Oh, Dawn, and the parents are crying. Shot on 16 millimeter, I think mostly around Baltimore, Maryland, right?
Yep.
It's one of John Waters' classic films featuring Divine, and what I'm going to say is I'm almost speechless because that cha-cha heel scene alone with Divine in that pink, Teddy thing.
Well, while you're there, you should order all the John Waters films at deep discount.
And if they're on Criterion.
Because he's kind of the Shakespeare for gays, I think, John Waters. So, hey, be sure to go to focusgroupradio.com, click on the deep discount logo, and start shopping away. Right, Garrett?
Thanks, Deep Discount.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got the folks from Visual Aids joining us. We have Esther McGowan, the executive director, as well as Pat Owens, who's the board chair, and they're going to come talk to us about this great organization based here in Manhattan. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is where you want to go to find out all about our show. And joining us now are folks from Visual Aids. Next to me, well, I always do that, and in the audio it doesn't matter because we're in a studio, right? So we have Esther McGowan, who's the executive director of Visual Aids, and we have Pat Owens, who's the Visual Aids board chair. And I've known Pat for many, many years. So what do we say when we do that when they give a fact about something?
A fact about something?
Well, like if you said I'm the reporter and I've known the person I'm interviewing for full transparency.
Oh, in the spirit of
transparency. In the spirit of transparency. I've known Pat for a long time.
How long?
Long
30?
time.
Decades.
30, 40?
Decades.
Decades.
Well, somebody asked me how long I knew you.
Yeah.
And I said it was probably close to 40 now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was a high school, sophomore year.
Sophomore
I've
year.
known John as long as you've known him, so I'd say it's less than 40.
That's not possible because
So
no one's that old.
you guys are joining us from an amazing organization, and I've known about it because since I've known Pat and his passion for the organization. But it's called Visual Aids.
Yes.
And you're newly installed executive director, new as in
One
maybe
year.
a year
it's
now.
been a year, which is great. And I've actually been with the organization for going on 6 years. First, I was associate director for quite a few years, and then I was promoted to executive director last summer, and it's been amazing.
So why don't you guys give us a quick thumbnail of, if it's even possible, of Visual Aids?
Sure, absolutely.
I'll defer to Esther.
Okay, wonderful. It's a small organization that does big projects. We've been around for 30 years. It's our 30th anniversary year this year. And so we were founded in 1988, which was at the height of the AIDS crisis at the time, what we kind of call the original AIDS crisis. There is still an AIDS crisis, I want to stress that. But this was at a time before the pharmaceutical industry had created the drugs that are helping. Exactly, when it was very much a crisis with people passing away. And so this organization was created specifically by the art world as a way to both use art in activism and think of ways that the art world could create its own activism and be effective in the fight against AIDS. And then as the organization continued, another main part of our mission became becoming an archive for images of artwork by HIV-positive artists and artists who are passing away. Because what was happening at the time, in the late 80s, in particular, there was a lot of misinformation about AIDS and HIV. Yeah. And so, for example, in New York City, you would walk down the street and you would see someone's entire group of belongings just thrown out on the sidewalk because family members didn't, many people were not close any longer with their family members. Their families didn't want anything to do with them because they had AIDS. The landlord didn't want anything to do. Their neighbors didn't want anything to do with them because they were worried that they would become infected. They didn't understand what was happening with the virus. And so people would literally take someone's belongings when they passed away and just throw them all out on the street. And so
artwork in dumpsters. So.
and so if someone was an
Someone's whole
artist,
life in a dumpster.
exactly. And so if someone was an artist, that included their artwork. So you would walk down the street in the East Village and you would see 15 paintings just in the garbage. And so arts administrators at the time who were working in museums and art galleries thought, we need to stop this. We need to sort of start, find a way to at least archive the images of this work. We don't have space to archive the work, but at least try to archive the images of the work for future generations so that people's legacies won't be lost. And so it was actually a wonderful artist who unfortunately passed away named Frank Moore, who, and I encourage everyone to look up Frank Moore, Google him, his work is gorgeous. And he was one of the main instigators of this idea of a visual archive of artwork by HIV.
How long did he live after he started the archiving project?
He passed away in 2001.
Oh, okay,
I believe. I need to double check that, but off the top of my head, I believe it was
About that
2001.
time,
And he started the archive project in '94 with a gentleman named David Hirsch. And so, Frank actually lived quite a bit longer than many people at the time who were living with HIV and AIDS, but he did unfortunately pass away.
When it says in the bio that Visual AIDS is a activist organization.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a lot of times when you hear the word activist, you're thinking it's kind of in your face or it's going to be aggressive, similar maybe ACT UP.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I know you're not the same, but
Yeah.
so I wonder how do you guys define what an activist organization is?
Absolutely. Well, it's actually really interesting that you bring up that word because that's a word that's come back into our culture in a very big way in the last few years because of everything that's going on politically. So, in the early days of Visual AIDS, we used art to create activist projects. So, for example, we would work with very famous artists like, for example, Glenn Ligon or Barbara Kruger.
Barbara Kruger,
Are
sure.
well-known artists who are artists that use words in their artwork, which so it's kind of a perfect way, they're perfect artists to engage in activism. And we would commission them to make an artwork that somehow shares information about HIV and AIDS. So at the time, it was those projects started happening in the early 90s. So there would even be, for example, a hotline. There would be an artwork, and it would have imagery. It would have a call to action around educating yourself about HIV, and then there would even be a hotline at the bottom for people to call. And what's interesting is these projects are called broadsides, and that's kind of an old-fashioned word, but it's literally like the idea of a poster, a fold-out, something that goes on the wall that you can actually pass out to people in an activist setting so that you're actually sharing information. And they would be made, the artist would create the original artwork, and then Visual AIDS would create an 8.5 by 11 black and white version that literally, so it could be photocopied for free. People would go, this is actually very common with ACT UP as well, is people always knew someone that worked at Kinko's. So you would get your buddy who worked.
That's before.
Yeah, exactly. This was how it was done. So you got your buddy who worked overnight at Kinko's when the managers weren't paying attention, and they would run off, 1,000 of these things, and they would be distributed for free. And looking back on them now, they're really exciting projects, in part because they're really well-known artists, but also, it's a very iconic way to use art in activism. And what's interesting is that now these same pieces that were photocopied at Kinko's and given out for free are actually hanging in museums.
I was going to say, yeah.
So it's an interesting, and I actually did an event at the Whitney Museum recently because they have still have a wonderful activism show that's up right now looking at the different ways that artists use in activism over the years, and there's a section on HIV and AIDS, and they included these broadsides, but they're framed on the wall in the museum. And we did an event, and I told everyone at the event about
how they were made,
exactly, that they were meant to be given out.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's exactly.
Now, would you classify the Day Without Art as an activist?
Well, both of them.
Could you tell us about Day Without Art?
Well, both. They're two things. They're two very iconic projects that are in the DNA of visual aids, and one is everyone knows the Red Ribbon Project. So, I mean, that was that was
so we have some examples.
as visual aids was being formed by these curators and artists. They like the Kinko's. They wanted to come up with something that was a very direct, very simple, recognizable symbol.
For those listening or watching, the Red Ribbon came from visual aids.
Yeah.
Came from visual aids.
This was your project.
That was news to me.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, it's
we
news
all
to a
knew
lot of
about-
people.
We all
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
about the Red Ribbon, and John and I were talking
right.
before, and I said, "My gosh, you're kidding me."
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's become so ubiquitous
Right.
in culture. You don't think, oh, someone thought of it and made it,
Right.
but it was actually what was called the Artist Caucus of Visual Aids, which was a group of artists led by an artist named Alan Frame, who's someone we still work with a lot today. And they literally sat around a table and came up with this idea. And it came from the Iraq War because I don't know if people remember. So it was 1991. So the Iraq War, people were
first.
tying the first Iraq
Yeah.
War exactly.
Right.
People were tying yellow ribbons around trees and fences
that's-
for bringing the soldiers back home.
right.
And they thought, well, we have a war. We have another war. It's the war on AIDS.
Interesting genesis of the idea. Huh?
Yeah, and fighting against the Republican administrations who were burying AIDS in what they talked about. They were, millions and billions of dollars were going to the Iraq War, and very little was going to fund AIDS research. So they came up with the idea of a ribbon for AIDS, and the whole idea of it was that it would be always given away for free. That you make them, anyone can make them and use them and wear them. You could just buy your own ribbon and put it on. And some people, when they find out we created it, people think, oh, you must have a lot of money because the red
didn't
ribbon is
copyright it.
everywhere.
Copyrighted, no.
It was never copyrighted, and that was intentional because it's meant to be a public activist project.
But over the years, groups would get together and make the ribbons with the pin, and it was a way for HIV artists, lots of people in the community to come together just to talk about the crisis and
While they're making.
while they're making these ribbons with pins. So, and that still happens today. We still have these ribbon bees, like quilting bees, that happen around the country, and it's a way to bring the community together. So, two aspects of it: one is it's free and replicable, but also it's a way of bringing a community together and also helping continue to raise awareness. The red ribbon is still so iconic, and everyone knows exactly what it means, and it's everywhere. And
So when a company like, I'll use the example because I think Gap did it. They were doing the candles or whatever, and they had the image of the ribbon. It was the One campaign or something. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Yeah, and they have a campaign called Red as well. Which
Red.
is
Did they
their-
work with you guys on that, or that's
No.
just?
No, organizations or corporations or anyone who uses the red ribbon doesn't have to get approval from us, and never has. Even when it was made into a postage stamp, we didn't.
I mean, and a U.S. postage
Yeah,
stamp.
U.S.
Not
postage
just
stamp.
like
Yeah,
some,
exactly.
like little
Yeah.
Hallmark thing.
Yeah.
It was like,
You regret that?
No, because it's
Well, no, because you're. I mean, you obviously. we don't work for free, right?
Right.
Right,
So,
right.
do you guys regret the fact that maybe you could have collected money, not knowing?
of course, it,
But is that the fine line of the art and?
Well, it could have been. I mean, yeah, of course, it could have been a revenue source if it were copyrighted. But then, if it were copyrighted, it also would have been very limited in terms of how it could be distributed, how people could use it, and ultimately, our goal is to raise awareness as broadly as we possibly can using a visual image, using a visual art. So that probably ultimately would have been. Took us in a direction of being a very different organization and probably not as effective as an organization because we'd be managing a copyright all the time instead of being grassroots, being out in the community with artists and with arts projects in a way that continues to raise awareness and engage lots of people. And also, it makes us very responsive to what is still, the AIDS crisis. It's different now, but it still exists. I mean, it's with, HIV criminalization, with women who have HIV, with people of color, and so there's, we seem to keep on, I would say reliving, but we still have the same experience of the HIV crisis as immediate as it was even 30 years ago. It's just different now.
well, I want to talk about that because that current, the AIDS crisis as it is today, not the one that we actually knew, but it has evolved and changed.
Right.
But could you talk a minute about another one of my favorite things is Day Without Art. It's so obvious to people who go to museums when this day happens. It's December 1st, usually every year, and each museum might deal with it differently. I found some images of the Guggenheim where they actually covered with black artwork. So you could go to the museum, but you're not going to see the art because it's the day without art. And has that been an effective?
Well, it's changed over the
Yeah, it's
years, but
changed
still
over- yeah.
very effective.
It's very
I mean,
effective. Well, it's interesting to point out that we have done it every year since 1989. And what the images that you're showing on the screen, and people listening on the radio, these are images of artwork covered in museums and the Guggenheim Museum with a black shroud over it. And those are from the early years, late 80s and early 90s of this project, when it very much was about removing art, covering up art, closing the doors of a museum or gallery, as an indicator of the loss that was happening in the art world specifically, but also in general, because of the AIDS crisis, and to encourage people
That's
to
a good way
think-
of saying it, actually. It's a loss.
Yeah.
It is. And
So if you
And
go to the
it's a
museum,
form
you're
of-
losing the experience of engaging
Yeah.
with the art. It's a cool.
Yeah, and it's also about mourning. You know, the artwork being covered up in black shrouds, the museum having a shroud. It's very much mourning, mourning. But the project, we've done it every year since then, but it's changed a lot, and it's evolved to kind of represent how HIV and AIDS has changed. So now we call it Day Without Art, but the out is in parentheses, so it's actually a day with art. We actually commission new artwork and work with artists to make new projects that illuminate issues of HIV and AIDS today, and we share it internationally. So originally, there were hundreds of museums and galleries all over the world who took artwork off the wall. Right. Now there are many hundreds of galleries and museums all over the world who show a new project on the week. It's not only December 1st, it's that week. It can be, some museums keep it up for months.
Nice evolution.
Are they all HIV positive artists then?
Not all. We always work with many HIV positive artists. We always include their perspective and voices in everything we do, but we don't always only work with HIV positive artists, because often other artists also have a relationship to activism or HIV and AIDS, or their work somehow speaks to it. So, for example, this last year, December of 2017, we did, for many years now, we've actually been commissioning films, short films, because that's something that you can actually send around the world easily.
Yeah.
You just email
Quite
it
easily,
literally to
yeah.
people. And it also allows different types of organizations to show it however they are able. So, for example, a huge museum like the Whitney or MoCA in LA can have a big auditorium with a huge screening and a big audience sitting there. A small AIDS service organization could show it on a monitor in their office or on their website if they wanted to, and everything in between. So it's very malleable.
Accessible.
And accessible, exactly, very accessible. And it's been very successful. And it's a series, we've had different video projects. We have a series called Alternate Endings, which we've done multiple years in different forms. So we had Alternate Endings. The first one, we commissioned 7 artists to make short films that we packaged together. We then, this past year, did something called Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings. And that actually works specifically with Black artists and filmmakers, many of whom are living with HIV, but of diverse generations, to make films. And we don't really give them a parameter other than it somehow needs to be about what HIV and AIDS means to them in their life. So, for example, an artist who is living with HIV could maybe do something that's really just about their life and how they feel.
Their daily routine.
Even
or,
something, an artist named Mickey Blanco did an amazing piece that's very abstract. That's sort of just about how they feel. And then an artist, a well-known filmmaker of an older generation like Cheryl Dunye, made a documentary about activists in the South who have been doing incredible work for years. So there were different ways that people illustrated what HIV and AIDS means to them today.
So it's continued to evolve.
It has continued to evolve.
We're it's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Esch. We're talking with Esther McGowan, who's the executive director of Visual AIDS, and Pat Owens, who's the board chair. And we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and I want to find out how you're making money.
Okay.
Because you need to raise money, and
Yes,
I'm
we do.
wondering, and I'm sure that's a big part of what you're doing, and
Absolutely.
how John mentioned the question earlier about how the whole movement is evolving,
Yeah.
and so we want to
Great
address
question.
that.
Okay.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
And in business a week, I got more money and I know what to do with.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
Herrera Rocher. He is doing well.
Okay, that's weird.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett. Joining us is Esther McGowan,
Yes.
McGowan, Executive Director of Visual Aids, and Pat Owens, the Visual Aids Board Chair. All right, so as Tim said before we went to break, all the good work that you do does need to have a staff and an office space and resources.
Exactly.
And I guess that falls to the board.
It falls to the board. We have a very good board of trustees who are very proactive in helping introduce us to supporters. But we also have a really great community of foundations and lots of organizations who really believe in what we do and fund us. And it's very hard for us to go after typical funders because we are at the intersection of art and advocacy. So we're not like a museum or an arts organization. We're not a service organization. So we're in between. So our story sometimes is very, very hard to distill into something that is readily understandable and appreciated. So a lot of our work on the board is really bringing more folks into the fold in terms of understanding the impact of what we do. Because everyone says, "Oh, you do art projects, and I know you help HIV-positive artists." I mean, one thing we do, for example, we still give HIV-positive artists materials grants each year to help them continue to make their work. As we've grown over the years, it's really becoming easier for people to understand how important it is that what we do raises the visibility of artists who don't have the opportunity to show their work, but also continue to raise the visibility of the issues around HIV, because there's still a lot of stigma, and so we're very fortunate that we have over 30 different foundations who will offer us grants, and also
so you have a grant writer that's actually.
Well,
Are you the grant writer, Esther?
One of the things that's interesting is that the organization is actually very small and has always been small. It used to be 2 people for many years. And then it grew to 3, and now we're up to 5. But that's big for us.
Well, it's an outsized footprint that you
guys
have.
Well, it is, and that's the thing is we do many programs, and we do big, well-known programs like Day Without Artists you were mentioning. They're national programs, and so from a fundraising perspective, it's both difficult because we don't have a big staff to write the grants or to do outreach, but it's also really interesting from another perspective, which is that the majority of our funds go to the programs. We have very low overhead. I mean, I'll do the fundraising spiel. We have very low overhead, and we all work out of a one-room office, and our 82 cents of every dollar that someone donates goes to programs.
It's a
it
huge
doesn't go
percentage
to pay
of a donor dollar. Now,
exactly.
You guys, I know of a couple of things that I love that you do. So earlier in the year, at the beginning of, I want to say the end of spring, beginning of summer, you did your annual gala, Vava Voom, which is an amazing event. It's a fun, if you happen to be
here in Manhattan.
Yes, and it's an amazing space, and it's filled with really cool people that are so happy to be there. A silent auction, some great art pieces, wonderful speakers, and some great awards. And then another event that I really like that I think raises some good money for you is probably Postcards from the Edge.
Postcards from the Edge, which is
artists create.
Yeah, they create.
Are they really postcard?
We send out postcards, right?
4 by 6, but people can make them in any form, but they have to be 4 by 6 inches. They can be vertical or horizontal, but in the shape of a postcard. They aren't actually postcards. They are little artworks.
Okay.
And it can be sculpture, painting, drawing, photography, collage. People do all kinds of things.
It's an amazing opportunity to pick up. Now, I know this is going to sound a bit craven, but
let's remember the key element of Postcards from the Edge. So we have close to 1,500 artists who will send us
postcards,
but they sign it on the back. Right. So when we install it, all 1,500 of these postcard-sized works, we have everyone from famous artists like a Marilyn Minter and Ed Ruscha to an unknown artist. They're all displayed in a grid. So the only way you can buy it is by if you look at it and you like it, and you don't necessarily know who made the work. So
That's
we have the work. So for a famous artist, for example, that postcard-sized work could be worth a few $1,000s. All of them are $85 no matter what. So so it's a great way for all our community of artists to come together to display their work. But on the day that we have postcards opens, there's usually a line down the block because everyone kind of knows what they want.
Did you guys do a preview?
We have a preview party the night. It's over the course of a weekend in January. So there's a preview party on the Friday night. You can see all the work, and a lot of people like to come and think they can spot a famous artist's work, and then they'll get in line on Saturday morning when the sale opens, and they'll literally run in the doors.
So you don't bid on it.
We have video. No.
Everything's $85.
Everything's $85, and what's exciting is it's anyone can make an artwork and submit it.
Yeah.
So there's no judgment around the work that's submitted. So I make one.
Yes, you can
make one. You can make one.
Is there
Everyone
any
makes
magic
one.
around the $85?
The magic is it's a fundraising number. I would say that it's affordable. We want it to be accessible because it's artwork that's made by a variety of artists to begin with. You're more likely to get something by an unknown artist than you are to get one by a famous artist. A beautiful work, but by an unknown artist. So 85 is anyone can participate. You talked about our gala, and we also do a gala, but that can be an expensive proposition for
more. The gala is certainly more what people think of when they think of a charitable organization doing their major fundraiser. Another event that you guys do, which is not a fundraiser, is the Valentine's.
Positive Women.
Yep.
I went to the one of the events 2 or 3 years ago. It was right after our last gig, and the day after we had that fateful call with the former platform, and Pat took me to this event. And it was at a paper making studio right around here in the West 30s, and it was people making Valentines to send to women from around the world who are HIV positive. Right. And you spoke at that event, and you talked about how the impact when they receive one of these is just...
It's really kind of mind-blowing because what it was a genesis of the Fireland Artist Residency, the Dudonné papermaking studio and visual aids, and Love Positive Women. Love Positive Women was a loose organization of HIV-positive women around the world who really wanted to provide support to one another. And they continue to. They have teas where they get together, they share emails, and we had this idea of their Valentine's Day, some of these women just aren't even acknowledged. Yeah. And so we decided let's invite artists to hand make Valentines and then send them to the Ukraine, to Sub-Saharan Africa. And it's really one of the most touching programs that we have because we send them out, and a woman who will self-identify and say, yeah, I'd like to receive a Valentine, and she'll get it in the mail, and then we'll get an email back where it's framed in a kitchen somewhere, and the responses we get are just overwhelming. And particularly in the New York area, there's a big group of HIV positive women who provide a lot of support to one another. And I think you were at the event where some of these women provided testimonials, and they said when so a woman even got a Valentine, she didn't expect it. And it was on Valentine's Day, and she was feeling just really sad, and she got that, and it's been hanging in her living room for about 5 years.
I remember her talk, actually, because she talked about, which is what you guys are really doing, which is this illness, this disease, is a 24/7 thing. It's like I said to you when you came in, I have a cold. Yeah. The head cold's going to give it 72 hours or whatever, it's going to be gone. That's not the case with HIV, and there are days when you wake up and you don't want to have this illness, and you don't want to be a patient, and there are days when you can manage it. And she spoke about one of those days where she had fatigue from being a patient and being someone who had to either talk about it or not talk about it, and that thing came, and it was a very cool event. And I think that really puts into perspective that action, the Valentine's, postcards from the Edge, Red Ribbon, Day Without Art. These are all little emotional touchstones that I think are so important that I do believe many of us are forgetting with the rise of the new treatments and PrEP. But it is still a huge epidemic. And while it may not be affecting gay white men as much as it was in the late 80s, early 90s, it is still very much in communities of color and women. And it's every person's disease now. It's not just
But it's also, but it's not diabetes, right? And
correct.
So I think underlying our programs is that
it's not a condition like that. Yeah.
Everyone wants to be acknowledged, respected, and loved. And what we do is, that underlying a lot of what we do, because bringing people together to let them know that whether they're an artist that's toiling away in their studio, whether it's a woman in the Ukraine, they all need to know that their lives
part of
matter.
the fabric.
That we value them, and art is such an effective tool to really provide that
Uniquely
message.
effective, yeah.
And the thing to remember, too, is there's also a great deal of stigma still.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly in many places for women, women have traditionally had fewer support networks and have had less ways to talk about being HIV positive with each other, with the world, and in certain communities in particular, there's a huge amount of stigma for women. And so part of the Valentine Project and other things that we do working with HIV positive women is about reducing stigma as well. And
if you go to our website, www.visualaids.org, and you'll see there are so many things going on. For example, each month we invite someone to curate a show.
In fact, John, I think I put some slides up of a gallery that's up now. I think you will recognize the artist.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like a mask someone made. These are just random things I found, and this was called Until We Are Free.
Yeah. The artwork on the left, the mask, is by an artist named Frederick Weston, who's someone we work with a lot. Fred's amazing. One of the things that's really interesting about our archive and online registry of work by HIV positive artists, and also our exhibitions and books and other things that we do, is we often highlight the work of artists who aren't necessarily known. So an artist who doesn't have gallery representation or may not have ever been in a museum, who curators or students aren't necessarily
But it gives them
studying.
exposure.
It gives them exposure, and the archive is actually a way for a curator or someone to learn about artists they don't know about. So Fred is an example of an amazing artist who was making art in his apartment, in a day program for people who are HIV positive, and he's many things. He's also a poet, and is incredible. And so he has now, because of his work with us, he's represented by a gallery, and his work has been shown in the Museum of the City of New York and other places.
Fantastic.
So so I'll just give him a little shout out if people want to go on the Visual Aids website, visualaids.org, and go to our artist registry. So these are different artists. What Pat was starting to mention was we do. Every month, we have an outside person curate an online gallery, so not something that's in a bricks and mortar gallery. It's actually on our website. All the images that they draw from are in our artist registry. That's one of the criteria.
Okay. So they curate it. They put it together.
And they come up with a theme. It's something that interests them. It can be, someone did one about the color blue. Someone else did one about HIV criminalization. Every year. At the time we do the Love Positive Women, we have an HIV positive woman curate it, and it's usually about the role of women in the artwork. And so it can be about anything, and we work with people that are, not everyone's a curator professionally. Some people are writers, activists, artists.
Exactly. To give them the chance to curate it means they're going to put their eye to it and their sensibility.
So can people donate at visualaids.org too?
Absolutely. So,
trying to get down to
I know. I love this.
Time's a thief.
I would encourage everyone to go to our website and just spend a little bit of time just seeing what great work our artists make, and also just we accept $1, $10, $25, whatever you want to.
Yeah, people can give online. They can write a check.
There you go.
I want to go to that art sale.
Go to Postcards.
From the Edge. It'll be in January.
Pat always gives me the heads up.
You have to let me know. So Esther McGowan, the Executive Director of Visual Aids, and Pat Owens, good friend for many years, thank you for joining us. And be sure to go to visualaids.org to learn more. We also have a link posted at our Facebook page, which is Focus Group Radio. So thank you guys for coming in.
And big thanks for all your amazing contributions to the community. it makes a difference.
Thank you.
We want to thank our friends at Deep Discount for supporting us here on the Focus Group. Be sure to go to focusgroupradio.com and click on the Deep Discount logo because we get credit for it. Right, John, and the pirate or the leprechaun can do one more.
Top of the pride, and then we box them up and we put them away on the shelf. Yeah.
And thanks to our friends at Volkswagen of America. There's some great new cars coming out toward the summer and fall season. Be sure to go to VW.com to learn more and select the car that's should be on your list if you're out looking for a car. John and I are going to be doing 2 road trips later in the year, so be careful out there, listeners. Keep your eyes peeled for us. We want to thank John and Garrett for bringing us out via the magic of I don't know what we're doing, the internets, right?
Free media.
Free media. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Happy Canada Day and happy birthday, America, next week. We will have a live show. Not live, recorded show for the 4th of July. Everyone have a great week. Take care. Oh, don't text and drive, arrive alive. I forgot. I forgot John gave me a face. What are you doing?
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Formerly on Sirius XM Satellite Radio and now accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.